You're listening to Everyday Engineering, the City of Madison's engineering podcast where we talk about infrastructure, complex topics explained simply, from the water that flows down your drain to the rain and snow that drains into the lakes, by way the curbs and streets we design. City engineering touches your life in so many ways, explained right now in Everyday Engineering. It takes all of us to improve our stormwater system. It certainly is a total team effort, but if you have someone like the late Roger Bannerman leading the way through hard work and dedication, the difference for the community is huge. My name is Hannah Mohelnitzky, City of Madison Engineering Division Public Information Officer, and here to tell us more about Roger, his work, and how it's making an impact on all of us is someone who knows him best. Jane Bannerman, Roger's wife. And we're also joined by stormwater engineer Phil Gaebler from the City of Madison Engineering Division. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
This is going to be a wonderful way to learn more about Roger. Roger was definitely known in the stormwater community here in the City of Madison, but for those who may not know him or his work, can you share a little bit more about Roger, Jane?
Sure. Roger worked for the DNR for 40 years. And when he retired, he worked for the USGS for a while, and then he continued as a volunteer. So he was actually working some last year. And he was passionate about his work. He started out, I believe, in agricultural runoff, and then eventually sort of transitioned, or I don't know why, but went into non-point source pollution and really urban runoff.
Wow. And when you say passionate,
passionate, yeah.
Like, what do you mean by that? How can you kind of explain that a little bit further?
Sure. Roger, first of all, Roger loved his work. When we retired, I took a class at MATC, and we were asked, do you love your job? And he wasn't at the class because he was too busy. But when I came home, and just so you know, 30 people out of 30 people, 2 of us raised our hands. So not everyone loves their job.
Sure.
So he said, absolutely, I love my job. I love what I do. And he loved working with people, lots of groups. And that was his real strength, is to try to bring in other partners. When he had an idea, he would try to figure out who could he get to work with him, and was very good at it. And so he was interested in all the aspects of water management. So salt, leaves, rain gardens, whatever was out there, he was interested in. And of course, now that we have new problems, and he was hearing from USGS staff about what they call them, FAFSAs?
The PFAS.
PFAS.
Yes.
He was just starting to learn about that, but that was kind of the next challenge for water. And so he was always interested in how to engage people and how to educate. And I think that's the wonderful thing about a lot of his projects that he got involved in was education. Mm-hmm. Whether it was salt and educating people who apply salt to our streets, mm-hmm. or whether it was rain gardens, where you teach people about, the wonderful thing about rain gardens is you're actually teaching people about the water cycle and what happens to our water, which most of us don't really know. But you're doing it in a context of building a rain garden. And so it's just kind of a natural thing. And you sort of get a chance to explain to people, it's really bad when all this dirty water goes into our lakes and causes issues and flooding and so forth, which mm-hmm. has been a big issue in Madison.
Absolutely.
So his career has really been about partnerships and about speaking to people, lots and lots of talks, and on lots of different subjects, and a lot to just ordinary people like garden clubs, master gardeners, people who are just interested in learning more about the environment.
Sure, and working with a lot of people like Phil.
Yeah.
Phil, you worked with Roger.
I did. I worked with Roger quite a bit. So he was on the Friends of Lake Wingra, and we met with them quarterly my entire tenure here, and out of that came the leaf study that we did with USGS, and a lot of the salt work that I then worked to develop the City of Madison Salt Certification Program and that collaboration, right? Mm-hmm. And when I started, I honestly had no idea that salt was an issue at all.
Sure.
Masters in Water Resource Engineering, never thought about salt ever. And he opened my eyes to it. And I was like, whoa, this is a huge issue that
Roger
did, that you need to get ahead of. And then the leaf study, I was like, oh, leaves are a little bit of an issue, but we pick them up. What's the problem? They're only there for 2 months. And then you look at the data and you see, oh, well, 2 months is half of the phosphorus load from the city of Madison for the whole year. And it's all from leaves just on the street. And we talk about, passion of your job and do you like your job? The day that we got the data from our leaf study, it was just like a kid at Christmas. It was so cool to see, like, whoa, like it was just so excited.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing when you see people with passion coming together, and it really puts a human take on what we do and the impact Roger really has.
Right.
And, being someone who, I didn't get to meet Roger, but what's fantastic is learning about his passion. It radiates through everyone. I mean, it really does. And it's really touching. And you don't think of that when you think of stormwater at all. Like you think of waterworks in a human form, but it sure is. I think that we all feel it even in this room as we talk about Roger, because he's like, when you talk about impact and truly loving what you do and how important that is when it comes to connecting with engineers like Phil, who is the salt man now, and that started with a spark of passion from Roger, especially. Like, it's pretty amazing to work with people who appreciate that. And you got to experience Roger in his full form all the time, So I guess, can you share why he was so passionate? Why was it? What was it, Jane?
Well, I think part of it is that he loves being outdoors. He loves nature. I mean, we kind of always said in our marriage, we don't go to concerts, etc. We go camping, we go hiking, and we go camping at the Boundary Waters, and we go hike in the Arboretum, and we go canoe on the lakes. And so we're really outdoors is our entertainment. And so Roger was very passionate about outdoors and about nature and enjoyed being in nature. And so I think all of his work was really how do we make our city environment, the watershed, healthier and make it better for people to enjoy outdoors. And I think he was always looking at ways to engage with people, and ways to show them, educate them, and to share with them. One of his projects out at Lake Wingra, we had some Edgewood students, and so Roger's telling them all about, Lake Wingra and various things about it, and he loved to talk to kids. These were like 6th and 7th graders. And so I think they even could pick up, his passion of he's really into it. And I think that's, and he didn't care who he was talking to. For example, with the SALT project, he was very excited about helping the people who actually apply the salt to get more training because they're critical. They're the people who are applying all the salt. And if they're trained, and they don't want to waste. Once they understand the issue, and you train them on how to do it. How can I calibrate my machine that's going to put the salt out so that it doesn't put too much? Obviously we need to put salt down, but we can do it in a better way. And then even that other project, I've forgotten what it's called, the pre-salting or whatever. It's got a name.
Pre-wetting or anti-icing, where you put
Anti-icing.
You put the brine down ahead of time.
Right, putting the anti-icing.
Sure.
I mean, he was very excited about that. So we drive out before a storm and oh, they're anti-icing, because again, that helps us. And again, part of the problem is that people's expectations have gotten crazy. We want there to be a storm, and then we want this pavement to be completely clean, and that's just not possible. And that leads then to huge amounts of salt being used to make it completely clean. So you have to, part of it is education. Again, educating people, salt is really bad. I mean, we've lost a number of wells I think at least one in Madison, right? Because of high salt.
I think we have one that is edging up towards the taste threshold.
Sure.
So with that, it's one where decisions are
careful.
going to have to be made. Do you blend that away?
Yeah.
Do you change the well? Do you abandon the well? And those are not inexpensive decisions,
Right.
And it's that cumulative impact of everyone saying, well, my little bit of salt doesn't make that much of a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we get our water from a well, and it's
Sure.
very deep, but still it can be contaminated. So again, I think his passion came from, and he was interested in all these things. He really was. He was really, whatever the next big thing was. With the Leaf Project, we ourselves for that project were driving around. Making calculations as to how many leaves there were in the streets. There was a system that he developed. We had students from the Badger volunteers coming and actually gathering all the leaves and then weighing them so that we could see, okay, how many leaves are a 5, how many leaves are a 4, how many leaves are a 3, and hoping that no one was going to call the police on us as we drove down the street, and then my job was to drive while Roger was on the computer, putting the numbers down.
Yeah.
So we were very involved in all those projects.
It sounds like you also are an expert in all of this a little bit, Jane. You
Yeah, a
picked
little
up
bit,
yes.
a little bit. I'm certainly not where Roger was, but you can't help but pick it up as you're driving down the street, right?
Yes.
And you didn't even get an engineering vest, which helps the police not get called.
Yeah.
I only had the police called me once, and I was promptly reminded by the police officer I should be wearing my vest.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Of course, yes. But this is good because it just shows, again, what you were saying too, Phil, like a kid in a candy store. Like, why is that important from like an engineering perspective? And I think that we sit in all these meetings and we talk about all these technical things and we talk about, we work with these people and but like the human aspect, that layer of like truly caring. And that's what I'm gathering is that he really cared.
He really did. Well, and I also think the idea of, like, when he was working on the Leaf Project, it was very important to him. One of the years we did it, we handed out bags for people to bag their leaves to see what effect that would have. And as we handed those out, we would stop and talk to neighbors about the project. And he loved doing that, explaining what's going on, why are we doing this, et cetera. And that was an important part is educating people. And actually, I think like our neighbors on our block, they see us. We sweep the curb, we literally sweep our curb.
You're those neighbors.
Yeah,
Yes.
and and our leaves are on our grass, and we don't put stuff in the driveway, and our downspouts are not facing our neighbor, And when we had the big storm in 2018, we had no flooding. And there were people on our block who shouldn't have had flooding because we live like high. We're at the top of the hill. They had flooding because their neighbor was aiming their downspout right at their basement, or one of the neighbors decided to circumvent the system where the water went through all the backyards, and he built a berm, which is like a mound, and he stopped it. And so all the water stopped at his house and went in his basement. So that was kind of a mistake.
Yeah.
But people don't realize, they don't understand how the system works.
Sure.
So it's really, I think he was really big on educating, and modeling. So we built our first rain garden in 1999. And right away they started having like tours where people could come and see different rain gardens. And so he loved to, show the rain garden, explain how it was working, and show the downspout and, the little way the water got in there and how you figured it out, and just talking to people. And then 2 years later, we built 3 more. So we have 2 big rain gardens in the backyard, and then what's called a turf rain garden, where it's just a depression and it's grass, but the water collects there. And so that helps, again, to hold the water back so it's not all rushing down to our neighbor's basement.
Yes, of course. And that is exactly why I wanted to bring it to Phil also is, we've named our rain garden program now after Roger Bannerman Rain Garden Initiative. We are very proud to do that. Can you share a little bit more about that and just anything else that you want to add to what Jane just mentioned, Phil?
Yeah, so the Rain Garden Initiative, the Roger Bannerman Rain Garden Initiative,
Yes.
really is about, helping residents that want a rain garden hit the easy button in a lot of ways, right? We're doing a street reconstruction project. We're going to rip up the road. We're going to rip up the curb. We're going to have equipment there for a very, very small fee, $100, which doesn't even fully cover the price of the plants. You get a professionally built rain garden in your terrace. That's the area between the sidewalk and your curb. And, that low cost of $100 comes with a few strings, and that is you have to maintain it, right? So if you enjoy gardening and like to do that, it's a great way to get a rain garden that takes pretty dirty water off the street, filters it, soaks it back into the ground. And, we've had a lot of success with that program, right? A big project last year in the Westmoreland neighborhood, we had 14 rain gardens go in.
Yeah.
And then a fair amount of the turf rain gardens that you talked about, which, don't take water from the street, but basically hold that water that falls on it so it doesn't run off. And we tried a whole bunch of other things over there. With, naming this the Roger Bannerman Initiative, right? It's because Roger and my predecessor really started this. They got a grant from the EPA, and they worked to put a bunch of these in on Adams Street in Madison. And, this is a pretty unique program nationwide in that we're doing it to better the water quality of the city. We aren't under a legal requirement to do so. It's all pretty altruistic. And that's kind of a special program to have. And it's very fitting that it's named after Roger. And I think there's a lot of good we can do with his volunteer approach. We also have a pilot study going on in the Westmoreland area that is, working to hopefully expand the initiative. And here we're working with private residents to say, if you go through the effort to learn how to build a rain garden and construct it, and or other stormwater management stuff on your site, you can get a rebate from the city, which has gone a long way to spark some interest, because not all this stuff is inexpensive. And we found that there's a lot of education that needs to happen, right? We do workshops, and, learning how to not cause a problem is a big step in this.
Yes.
So it's been good going out and trying to help homeowners troubleshoot and view their drainage and see their part in the system, and then talk about plants. And everyone has their different level of interest, right? Some people are really plant people.
Yeah.
They're very excited about specific plants, and how do you create the right ecosystem for those plants is a fun little side puzzle. And then sometimes you're like, well, I think your yard may not be the best one for a rain garden because there's these other issues of high groundwater or a drainage issue that is really beyond the scope of your average homeowner with a shovel to solve.
All of these things, including, all these resources. Obviously, your brain's a resource, but the rain garden manual, and that was also, that's a huge resource. It's also on our engineering website in the stormwater section, or if you just Google rain gardens, Roger Bannerman Rain Garden Initiative, it'll bring you to our site. But he had a huge impact on that rain garden manual that's used. Can you speak to that?
So
I can.
Oh.
So
Sure.
there was a original rain garden manual that Roger wrote with some other extension people, and they decided, I can't remember if it was last year or I guess maybe 2 years ago, they decided to update it. So they asked a lot of landscape people to help them, and some local landscapers helped, and it was a whole committee, and this whole committee updated and revised the rain garden manual. So it was put out by the DNR. And it basically tells people all the information they need to make a rain garden. And the neat thing about the new one, I just looked at it this morning, is that it actually suggests plants and gives you pictures of the plants. So you have
which helps.
Yes, which
especially
helps
if you don't know anything about it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I think the old one just, listed plants, but this one actually has a picture, which is, for those, I'm not a big plant person. I've learned a lot from our rain gardens. We have cup plants in our rain garden, which are if people don't know that plant, it's a very tall plant. It grows like 6 feet, 8 feet tall, and it has a very large leaf with a little cup by the stalk, and so that's why it's called a cup plant. It has a big yellow flower, and the chipmunks, et cetera, love to eat the seeds, when the flower is done. And it has very, very deep roots, and it's very a very, very good solid plant for a rain garden if you like a big tall plant, which we do. Mm-hmm. And so I've learned a lot of just by the things that we've planted, and I'm not a big plant person, so. So I was just telling Phil earlier that the first rain gardens we made, some of the people we asked, the garden people, they didn't really know about rain gardens, and so they wanted to put in things like sedges, which are plants that like wet feet. But a rain garden doesn't stay wet because you don't want that. You don't want a wet area in your yard. Mm-hmm. Basically what happens, it rains, the rain garden fills up, that's the way it should work, and then very quickly the water disappears. Mm-hmm. So there's no water left. It's always dry except for those storms. And it really infiltrates well because all these plants have these deep roots which help the soil. As Phil was talking about soil, a lot of soil where I live, it's very clay, very hard soil, and so the plants really just go with all those little roots, make all these little avenues for the water to get down into the water table.
Mm-hmm. Huge impact that rain gardens can have.
Absolutely, and I think the idea of having lots of rain gardens is one that Roger really was excited about, and this is a wonderful way to try to work on that, because his thought was, again, it's not going to solve our flooding totally, but if you have more rain gardens, you have less water. Mm-hmm. It's holding back water, and that's what we need to do. We don't want all this water rushing down the street and into the lakes and so forth. We want to hold it back, and it's a really good technique for holding back water.
I think huge part of this Roger Bannerman Rain Garden initiative is the resources. It gets back to the education. It gets back to the manuals, the how-tos, the how to cut costs but help the environment, how to be a part of your community and being a good watershed steward. All of that is on our website. As we kind of wrap up here, we are, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, by the time you hear it, there is a rain garden dedicated in Roger's name on the corner of Fox Avenue and Sheldon Street, right next to the Southwest commuter bike path here in the City of Madison. So next time you walk or ride by, maybe think of Roger or start your own rain garden. Help us reach our 1,000 rain garden goal here in the city. Also, again, part of the initiative. As we wrap up here and reflect on his instrumental stormwater work, anything else you want to share about Roger, how he's impacted our community, or anything else you want people to know?
Sure. He was on the one of the city committees. I think it was a committee on the environment. And one of the other things I was noticing that he worked on was coal tar, putting that down on driveways. He had done a lot of research and discovered that this is really nasty, awful stuff. And so it's now banned in the City of Madison. You can't put that on your driveway, and that's something that was an important thing to ban because it has a lot of very poor for the environment ingredients, and there are other ways to do driveways than that. So I think, again, he was always looking for issues that were simple. That was kind of a simple one. This is a really bad stuff. Let's ban it. And the city agreed and did it. So obviously with lots of education and research.
Anything else you want to add, Phil? How important his passion, I think, is the headline of everything that he does, and what he cared about. And I think a lot of things that you do in engineering also really reminds me of everything that Roger does, is the passion that you actually care and that you have enthusiasm about this. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I really do think what you do matters, and how you share about typically boring things like leaves and salt, and anything you'd like to share about Roger or his passion, or how it's really impacted you in the work you do for our community.
I think a lot of it is that if none of this stuff is boring, it's only boring if you don't care how it works. And I think that Roger did an amazing job of taking something that people like, oh, well, I don't understand that. Like, no, let's break it down. Like, here's how the salt impacts these things that you might care about. Right? If you care about fishing, you care about the little bugs in the lake. And little bugs are impacted by the salt. Mm-hmm. And here's how that happens. If you care about street flooding, or you care about flooding in the lakes, or algae in the lake, here's why a rain garden makes a kind of huge impact with minimal effort, right? And it just takes these little nudges in changing the way that we view a lawn, right? Like, why do we care about green grass, right? Why is that better than a rain garden? It's not. It's just our society's perception that we should have something neat and tidy. And where that came from, I don't know. But it exists. There's ways to change the way that we interact with the world that are very, very positive and give space for other things. That's kind of, I think if we look at it that way, these topics that might feel boring, stormwater management and shoveling the sidewalk, right? Mm-hmm. They aren't boring anymore. You think about their impact while you're doing them, and it feels bigger than the effort.
Absolutely. What a wonderful time this morning, speaking with both of you, learning more about Roger. Any last things you want to mention, Jane? You can have the final word.
Well, I would just say that I think the key to all of Roger's success, honestly, was collaboration, working with others. He really enjoyed working with people all over the state and with people in other parts of the country, and just, educating and learning and, working on these issues of clean water. He was really passionate about clean water.
Well, thank you, both of you. Roger left us in October of 2020. His work was instrumental in the stormwater community today and obviously for many years to come. Thank you for sharing so much about Roger. If you want to learn more about the Roger Bannerman Rain Garden Initiative and really reap all the benefit of his work and his publications and his manuals and all of the things that he's had such a hand in, head over to the cityofmadison.com/engineering website or just Google Roger Bannerman. You will see plenty of things pop up about his work. Very impressive, very helpful, and hopefully you can have a little spark of interest in stormwater, just a hair of what Roger really put his life toward. So thank you both for being with us. Thank you for listening. Again, we are always here for you every day in engineering.